Mark Thompson was a 52-year-old retired Navy SEAL, a warrior who had faced some of the fiercest battles, now living a simple life in the small town of Oakridge with his 19-year-old daughter Emily and his beloved wife. Their family was close-knit, full of love and warmth, though outside their front door, the world remained a place of challenges and injustice that few could truly understand. Every morning, Mark woke up to the soft light filtering through the window, the distant chirping of birds just outside his door. He cherished these quiet moments, a rare peace amid the storm of memories and experiences that still haunted him. Though the battlefield was far behind his instincts, discipline and fierce protective nature never left him. Mark carried with him an unshakable strength and a resolve to protect his family at all costs. Emily. His daughter was the pride of his life, a smart, strong young woman, sensitive, yet deeply caring. Their bond was special. They shared their joys, fears, and hopes openly. Linda, his wife, was the gentle anchor, the calm force holding their family steady, quietly supporting Mark and Emily through every step of their journey. Oakridge was a small town, peaceful with tree-lined streets and familiar faces. But beneath this calm exterior, Mark and his family lived with an undercurrent of unease. A dark, unmarked SUV had been parked near their home for several days, with strangers watching from a distance. Mark felt the weight of their presence a silent threat, but no one around could explain why. Mark was more than a soldier in body. He was a fighter against injustice every single day. He held evidence of war crimes and secret experiments, truths powerful enough to shake governments. This made him and his family targets of surveillance and intimidation, caught in a battle far larger than anyone in Oakridge realized. One evening, as Mark sat by the fire, reading, a sudden crash shattered the quiet. The front door was kicked open, and a heavily armed SWAT team stormed inside. Flashbang grenades exploded, disorienting the family, and his wife Linda was shocked with a taser right before his eyes. Mark's heart raced with shock and pain, but he stood firm, refusing to let fear control him. In the chaos, Mark's calm and unwavering presence stood out. He locked eyes with the officers and calmly declared 5 words that stopped them in their tracks. "I have the classified file." Those words were a key to a secret too dangerous to ignore. The team paused their aggression, shifting to caution. That classified file Mark guarded was a trove of damning evidence, proof of war crimes and covert experiments he had witnessed. This secret wasn't just about Mark's life. It endangered his family, his community, and the very truth itself. The peaceful life Mark longed for was shattered, but he knew the power of the truth he carried. Mark and Linda were not alone. Their community friends, lawyers, and human rights groups rallied to protect and fight alongside them. Mark Thompson's story is more than a tale of abuse of power and racial injustice. It's a testament to resilience, courage, and the unbreakable will to stand against wrongdoing. In their small Oakridge home, a veteran holds not just the memories of war, but shines a light for a generation fighting for truth and justice. Though challenges lay ahead, fueled by faith in justice and the strength of those who stood with him, Mark was ready to move forward, bringing his story out of the shadows, inspiring others to rise against injustice for a fairer, freer tomorrow. Before we get started with today's story, drop a comment below, telling us where you're tuning in from and what time it is. We'd love to see how far this story has traveled and who it's touched along the way. All right, let's jump right in, Maria. The morning sun cast a soft golden light over the quiet town of Oakridge, its rays filtering gently through the curtains of the Thompson household. Inside, the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the warm aroma of pancakes cooking in the kitchen, painting a picture of domestic bliss. Mark Thompson sat at the kitchen table, reading the morning news, while his wife Linda hummed softly as she prepared breakfast. Emily, their daughter, was in her room getting ready for college classes, laughter echoing faintly through the hallway as she chatted with a friend on the phone. It was a day like any other peaceful calm, and filled with the simple joys of family life. The kind of day that reassures you that the world is right at least within these four walls. Mark savored these moments, knowing how precious and fragile they were, especially after the years he had endured in the military. The quiet hum of life, the smiles, shared the mundane routines, all of it was a balm to a soul that had seen too much darkness. But beneath this serene exterior, the undercurrent of tension was already weaving itself through the day. There was a subtle unease Mark couldn't quite shake, a lingering sense that something was not as it should be. Maybe it was the way the morning mail had been left uncollected for too long, or perhaps the unusual number of unmarked cars parked near their street, their occupants watching silently. It was a feeling, a whisper at the edge of awareness that something was coming. Emily laughed again, a carefree sound that was about to be shattered. Around midday, the tranquility began to unravel. A sudden noise outside, a raised voice, the sharp bark of command snapped Mark's attention away from his newspaper. Moments later, the sharp pounding on the front door pierced through the calm. Before anyone could react, the door was flung open with brute force. A swarm of police officers stormed into the house, their faces masked, weapons drawn, moving with a practiced urgency that brooked no delay. Emily was caught in the middle, confused and terrified. Mark stood frozen, his military instincts kicking in, heart-pounding. His mind raced as officers pushed past their hands, rough, their commands harsh. Linda called out, "Emily, stay calm." But the chaos escalated. One officer grabbed Emily's arm, shoving her against the wall. She winced as a harsh blow landed across her cheek. Mark's eyes narrowed, fury igniting within him. He stepped forward, but the officers pushed him back with equal force. The scene was brutal, jarring, so unlike the quiet life they had lived just moments before. Neighbors gathered, shocked and whispering, some reaching for their phones to record the unfolding nightmare. The laughter that had filled the house just minutes ago was replaced by cries of pain and confusion. The day that had promised peace had twisted into a nightmare of injustice and fear. Mark's voice rose steady but fierce. "What is going on here? Why are you doing this to my daughter?" But his words seemed to fall on deaf ears amid the sirens and shouting. The officers, unaware of who Mark truly was, treated him as just another bystander, pushing him aside as they restrained Emily. Her eyes met her father's one last time, filled with fear and a silent plea for protection. That look seared into Mark's heart. In those moments, the reality of their vulnerability hit Mark like a blow harder than any he had faced in combat. The very people sworn to protect and serve had turned his world upside down, in an instant violating the sanctity of his home and the safety of his family. Yet beneath the pain and chaos, a fire was kindling inside Mark. A fire born from the depths of his being, one forged in years of hardship and survival. He knew then that this would not be the end. That justice, truth, and love would demand a fight unlike any he had fought before. This day, so ordinary at dawn, had become a defining moment. A stark reminder that injustice can strike anywhere, even in the places we call home. But it also marked the beginning of a journey, one that would test the strength of a father's love and a family's resolve to stand against the tide of cruelty. For Mark, Linda, and Emily, the battle had just begun, and they would face it together. The moment when Mark first heard about what had happened to Emily was like a punch to the gut, a shock so raw it left him breathless. He was at work going through the motions of a routine day when a frantic call came from Linda. Her voice trembled, laced with fear and desperation. "Mark, it's Emily. The police. They were rough with her. She's hurt." The words echoed in his mind as everything around him blurred. His hands gripped the phone tighter, knuckles whitening. "What do you mean, rough? What happened?" His voice was low, but edged with a fury barely contained. Linda's sobs broke through. They shoved her, Mark. They punched her. I don't know why they said something about a disturbance, but she didn't do anything wrong. She paused, her breath catching. "She's scared. She's in pain." Mark didn't wait for more. He dropped everything and rushed home, his mind racing faster than his feet. Every step was fueled by a desperate need to protect his daughter, to understand the nightmare unfolding behind closed doors. When he arrived, the scene was heavy with tension. Emily sat on the couch, her cheek-bruised eyes red from crying. Her hands trembled slightly as she wrapped a cold compress around the swelling. Linda was by her side, holding her close. Mark knelt down beside Emily, his voice gentle but firm. "Tell me everything, sweetheart. I'm here now." Emily's voice was barely a whisper. It started outside the coffee shop. "I was just waiting for a friend when these officers showed up. They said there was a complaint, but they wouldn't tell me what. Then they grabbed me. I didn't resist. I swear I didn't. But they pushed me against the wall, and one of them hit me. I felt so scared, Dad. I didn't know why." Mark's chest tightened with a mix of rage and helplessness. This was supposed to be a safe world for his daughter. Yet here she was, victimized by those meant to protect her. The weight of injustice settled over him like a heavy fog. He remembered the countless times he had trained for combat facing enemies on foreign soil. But nothing had prepared him for the pain of seeing his child hurt by those sworn to uphold the law. The betrayal cut deeper than any battlefield wound. Mark's mind spun with questions. Why had the officers acted with such brutality? Was it a misunderstanding or something darker? An abuse of power rooted in prejudice? The answers eluded him, but his resolve hardened. He would not let this go unanswered. That night, as Mark sat beside Emily holding her hand, he vowed to stand as her shield, to use every ounce of strength and knowledge he possessed to seek justice. This was no longer just about one night or one incident. It was about fighting a system that allowed such violence to happen unchecked. In the days that followed, Mark navigated a maze of police reports, conflicting statements, and evasive officials. Each encounter revealed more frustration, as the truth seemed buried beneath layers of denial and bureaucracy. Yet with every stone turned, Mark's determination only grew stronger. He met with lawyers, community advocates, and those who had faced similar battles. Their stories echoed his own stories of families torn apart, voices silenced, and justice delayed. But also stories of courage, resilience, and the power of standing up no matter the odds. Mark's military discipline guided him now in a different war. The war for his daughter's dignity, for accountability, and for change. And though the path ahead was uncertain and fraught with obstacles, he knew one thing for certain: he would never stop fighting. Because some battles are fought not on distant battlefields, but in the hearts and homes of those we love most. And Mark Thompson was ready to fight with everything he had. The call came suddenly, piercing through the quiet hum of Mark's afternoon. Linda's voice was tense, almost trembling, as she relayed the chaos unfolding just miles away. "Mark, you need to come quickly. It's Emily. She's been taken by the police, and they weren't gentle." The words hung heavy in the air, each syllable igniting a storm inside him. Without hesitation, Mark dropped everything. His military training kicked in immediately, every instinct, every muscle primed for action. There was no time to waste, no room for hesitation. He grabbed his jacket, slipped on his boots, and was out the door before the line went dead. As he sped through the streets of Oakridge, memories flooded his mind. Years of tactical training of missions, where seconds meant the difference between life and death, all surged forward now. But this wasn't a battlefield overseas. It was his home, his family, and his daughter who was in danger. The stakes couldn't be higher. Arriving at the scene, Mark was met with a flurry of flashing lights. Officers milling about with hurried steps and grim expressions. The air was thick with tension and confusion. Mark's eyes searched desperately for Emily. He spotted her near the curb, supported by a neighbor, but clearly shaken her cheek. Bruised, her gaze distant. Mark's heart clenched, but he pushed the anguish aside. Now was the time for clarity, for control. Approaching the officers, Mark introduced himself firmly. "I'm Mark Thompson, Emily's father. She's been hurt. I need to know what happened." His voice carried the authority born of years of leadership and discipline. One officer glanced his way, suspicious, but wary. "Sir, we're handling the situation." But Mark's presence shifted the atmosphere. His calm, resolute demeanor spoke louder than words. Drawing upon his experience, Mark assessed the scene quickly, observing the officers' body language, the way they communicated the tension in the air. He knew that escalation could mean disaster. So instead of anger, he chose steady assertiveness. "Let's de-escalate this," he said, locking eyes with the lead officer. "Tell me what happened. Let's get to the truth." His tone was unyielding, but respectful, disarming the initial defensiveness. The officers began to recount a version of events, claims of a disturbance resistance from Emily. But Mark, trained to spot inconsistencies and half-truths, listened intently. He asked pointed questions, demanded specifics, and pressed gently but firmly for accountability. Meanwhile, Emily, still trembling, looked to her father for reassurance. Mark reached out, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now, Emily. I'm here." Behind his calm exterior, Mark's mind raced. He knew the importance of keeping emotions in check, of using skill over anger. Years of military discipline had taught him that control in crisis was the difference between chaos and resolution. As the conversation unfolded, Mark's reputation, though unknown to the officers, began to work in his favor. His composed, strategic approach diffused potential aggression, turning what could have been a volatile encounter into a cautious dialogue. But beneath the surface, Mark felt the familiar ache of frustration. The injustice that had brought them here was palpable, and it fueled his determination to protect his daughter and seek justice. Later, as the dust settled and Emily rested, Mark reflected on the power of his training, not just the physical skills, but the mental resilience and calm under pressure. It was these qualities that now empowered him to face a different kind of battle, a battle for truth, fairness, and the safety of his family. Mark's first reaction was not rage, but strategy. He understood that strength was shown not in fury, but in measured, deliberate action. And as he prepared to navigate the coming storm, he knew that this strength would be their greatest weapon. The lesson was clear. In the face of injustice and chaos, it is not only courage that matters, but also the wisdom to remain calm, the skill to communicate effectively, and the resolve to stand firm. Qualities that Mark Thompson had honed in combat and would now use to fight for his daughter's future. The atmosphere was thick with tension as Mark Thompson stood face to face with the police officers, his eyes steady, his posture unyielding. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone present, a mixture of authority, fear, and uncertainty. The officers had just finished recounting their version of events, but something in Mark's demeanor signaled that this was far from over. Without raising his voice, Mark calmly said, "I need you to understand one thing. I'm a retired Navy SEAL." The room fell silent. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. The officers exchanged quick glances, their confidence wavering. In an instant, the dynamic shifted. What had been a scene charged with confrontation and suspicion suddenly gave way to a cautious respect. One of the younger officers stepped forward, his tone softer, but still measured. "Sir, we had no idea." "That changes things." Mark nodded slightly, aware of the power his identity carried. It wasn't just about the medals or the years of service. It was about what those years represented. Discipline, strength, leadership under pressure. In that moment, his past became a silent shield, commanding attention and deference. "Let me be clear." Mark continued, his voice calm but firm. "I'm not here to intimidate anyone. I'm here to ensure my daughter's safety and to find out what really happened. I expect professionalism, and I expect the truth." The lead officer, now more composed, replied, "We'll cooperate fully, sir. Your service is appreciated." Mark's revelation did more than change the tone. It created a space for dialogue that had been impossible moments before. The officers, who had been brash and forceful now, tread carefully, aware that they were dealing with someone whose experience demanded respect. Yet Mark's military background was not just a title. It was a testament to the values he embodied: honor, integrity, resilience. Those values shaped how he approached the situation, with patience, clarity, and unwavering resolve. The tension in the room was palpable, but Mark's steady presence was a calming force. He asked detailed questions, pressing for answers without anger. His demeanor reminded everyone that strength was not about aggression, but about control and purpose. Throughout the exchange, Mark kept his focus on Emily, who was nearby, still visibly shaken, but comforted by her father's presence. He whispered reassuring words to her, letting her know she was not alone. This encounter revealed a deeper truth about power, the kind that comes not from weapons or authority alone, but from experience, respect earned through sacrifice, and the quiet confidence of one who has faced real danger. For the officers, Mark's identity was a reminder that the badge they wore carried weight, but also responsibility. It underscored the importance of approaching every situation with care, respect, and a commitment to justice. For Mark, it was a moment of clarity. His past was not just a chapter behind him. It was a tool he could wield to protect his family and demand accountability. But more importantly, it was a call to uphold the very principles he had sworn to defend. As the officers prepared to take formal statements and investigate further, the air shifted from confrontation to cautious cooperation. The revelation of Mark's service had bridged a gap, if only briefly, between two worlds, one shaped by authority, the other by experience. This encounter was a turning point, demonstrating how identity and respect can influence the course of justice. It showed that sometimes the mere acknowledgement of one's history can change hearts and minds, opening doors that were once firmly shut. Yet beneath this temporary truce, Mark knew the real work was just beginning. Respect alone would not fix the wounds inflicted on his daughter, nor would it erase the injustice. But it was a crucial step. A reminder that even in the darkest moments, dignity and truth could prevail. Mark's calm revelation of his past had turned the tide not through threats or force, but through the quiet power of honor and experience. It was a lesson for all present, that true strength lies not in dominance, but in standing firm for what is right, even when the odds seem insurmountable. Emily sat quietly on the worn-out couch in the living room, her eyes distant and unfocused. The bruises on her face and arms told a story of violence, but it was the invisible wounds, the ones no one could see, that weighed heaviest on her soul. Her breathing was shallow, her movements hesitant, as if she was walking through an endless fog. The room was silent, except for the soft ticking of the old clock on the wall and the occasional sniffle from Linda, who sat nearby, gently wiping tears from Emily's cheek. Mark stood a few feet away, his heart heavy with a mixture of anger and helplessness. He had fought countless battles overseas, but nothing had prepared him for this, the battle within his own daughter's mind. Emily Mark's voice was soft, careful not to startle her. "I'm here. You're safe now." But even as he spoke, he knew words alone wouldn't heal the fractures inside her. Emily's eyes flickered with pain as she tried to process what had happened. The images of the officer's harsh hands, the forceful grip, the sudden blow. It all replayed in her mind like a relentless nightmare. Every time she closed her eyes, she relived the fear, the confusion, the sense of powerlessness. It was as if a part of her had been shattered. For days after the incident, Emily withdrew from the world. She stopped answering calls, avoided her friends, and struggled to find joy in the things she once loved. Her laughter, once so vibrant, was replaced by a heavy silence. Sleep was elusive, replaced by restless nights filled with vivid flashbacks. She often woke in cold sweats, heart racing, caught in the grip of a terror she couldn't escape. Mark watched helplessly, recognizing the signs of trauma he had seen in fellow veterans. But this was different. This was his daughter. The vulnerability of a young woman whose trust had been broken by those sworn to protect. Linda reached out, holding Emily's hand, whispering soothing words. But even her warmth couldn't penetrate the walls Emily had built around herself. They both understood that healing would be a long journey, one that required patience, compassion, and professional help. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Mark insisted they seek counseling. "This isn't just about bruises on the skin," he said firmly. "It's about what's inside the fear, the pain. We have to face it together." Emily was hesitant at first. The idea of opening up about her trauma was daunting, exposing wounds she feared no one would understand. But slowly, with the gentle guidance of a skilled therapist, she began to unravel the tangled emotions. Therapy sessions became a sanctuary, a place where Emily could voice her fears without judgment, where the weight of silence lifted bit by bit. She learned to identify triggers to ground herself when panic rose, and to rebuild a sense of safety within her own mind. Mark attended some sessions with her, providing silent strength. He wanted her to know she was never alone, that their family would walk this path hand in hand. The process was painful, filled with setbacks and breakthroughs, but it was also a testament to their resilience. The trauma Emily experienced was not uncommon among survivors of violence, yet each story was unique in its impact. Mark educated himself on post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and depression, determined to be the advocate his daughter needed. He reached out to support groups connecting with other families navigating similar battles. As weeks turned into months, Emily's light began to return. She found solace in small victories, a genuine smile, a day without fear, a moment of laughter. Though the scars remained both visible and hidden, they became symbols of survival, not defeat. This chapter of their lives underscored a powerful lesson. The wounds inflicted by violence are not always seen, but they are no less real. Healing requires acknowledgement, understanding, and unwavering support. Mark and Linda made it their mission to raise awareness about the psychological toll of such incidents. They spoke openly about the importance of mental health care, especially for those affected by trauma, and the need for communities to offer safe spaces for healing. Emily's story became a beacon of hope for others suffering in silence, a reminder that recovery is possible, and that no one should face their pain alone. The journey was far from over, but with each step forward, Emily reclaimed her strength, and Mark's faith in justice and love grew stronger. Together they would continue to fight, not just against injustice, but for the restoration of peace within their hearts. The days following the incident at the Thompson household were charged with a heavy mix of emotions: pain, anger, confusion, but also an unexpected ripple of support that began to flow through the Oakridge community. As word spread about what had happened to Emily, neighbors and friends found themselves at a crossroads. Would they stand with the Thompsons or turn away in silence? At first, the neighborhood was quiet, almost cautiously so. Some residents whispered behind closed doors, unsure how to react to the harsh reality unveiled in their peaceful town. There was a hesitancy, a collective pause, as if waiting to see what the official narrative would be before forming opinions. This silence, while understandable, felt like a void to Mark and Linda, a void that only deepened the pain of isolation. But not everyone stayed silent. Several neighbors began to step forward, offering help in small but meaningful ways. Mrs. Hernandez, who lived down the street, brought over homemade meals. Her warm smile, a quiet reassurance. The local pastor organized a small gathering to pray for the family, creating a space for healing and solidarity. Marcus, a young man from the nearby community center, volunteered to help Mark with errands and legal paperwork, sensing the weight the family was carrying. At the local coffee shop, conversations about the incident grew louder and more urgent. Patrons debated the role of law enforcement, the systemic issues that led to such violence, and the necessity of standing up for those wronged. The story of Emily and her family became a catalyst for broader discussions that had long been simmering beneath the surface. Amid this evolving atmosphere, the Thompsons received unexpected support from individuals who had themselves faced injustices. These voices joined forces with Mark and Linda, amplifying calls for accountability and reform. The community's growing awareness was a beacon of hope amid the shadows cast by the incident. However, the support was not unanimous. Some neighbors, wary of involvement or afraid of repercussions, chose to distance themselves. Their silence was a stark reminder of the complex dynamics at play. Fear, denial, and indifference still lingered. This division was painful, yet it underscored the importance of courage in the face of injustice. Mark understood this dichotomy well. He had fought battles where allies and enemies were not always clear, where trust had to be earned and guarded. But the community's tentative steps toward solidarity fueled his resolve. He knew that change required more than personal strength. It demanded collective action. Linda, too, found solace in the solidarity blossoming around them. She coordinated with neighbors to organize meetings, inviting local leaders, activists, and law enforcement representatives to dialogue openly. These gatherings became a platform for sharing stories, voicing concerns, and crafting solutions. The Thompson story became more than a personal tragedy. It became a rallying point for Oakridge. It exposed fractures within the community, but also illuminated the potential for healing and growth. Through these efforts, the family witnessed firsthand the power of community. Acts of kindness, public support, and shared determination created a safety net that began to mend the wounds inflicted by violence and injustice. Yet Mark knew this was just the beginning. The real work, changing hearts, minds, and systems, lay ahead. The strength of a community united in purpose was their greatest weapon against the forces that sought to divide and silence. This chapter of their journey taught a vital lesson. While injustice can isolate and harm, the power of a compassionate, engaged community can protect, uplift, and ultimately transform. In Oakridge, the Thompsons were no longer alone. Together with neighbors and allies, they stood ready to face the challenges ahead, knowing that justice is not a solitary fight, but a collective mission. The weight of the ordeal pressing down on Mark Thompson grew heavier with each passing day. He knew that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges far beyond what he had faced in battlefields overseas. This was a different kind of fight, one waged not with weapons, but with words, laws, and perseverance. To navigate this complex terrain, Mark understood that he could not walk alone. Late one evening, sitting at his kitchen table under the harsh glow of a single lamp, Mark picked up the phone. His voice was steady, but filled with determination as he dialed a number he had been researching for weeks. "Susan Parker, please," he said. When the receptionist answered, Susan Parker was known in Oakridge as a fierce advocate for justice, a lawyer who had dedicated her career to fighting abuses of power. She had helped countless families like the Thompsons, those caught in the crossfire of lopsided authority and systemic failings. Her reputation was built on relentless commitment and an unwavering belief in fairness. When Susan answered the phone, there was a hint of fatigue in her voice, but also a sharpness that commanded attention. "Mark Thompson. I've heard about your case. I'm sorry you're going through this. How can I help?" Mark explained everything: the incident with Emily, the police's harsh treatment, and the growing frustration with the lack of accountability. He spoke plainly, his words carrying the weight of a man who had seen injustice up close and was now ready to stand up against it. Susan listened carefully, her responses thoughtful and measured. "Mark, cases like yours are unfortunately all too common," she said. "But with the right approach, we can hold those responsible accountable. It won't be easy, but I promise we'll fight this together." That promise was a lifeline. For Mark, Susan wasn't just a lawyer, she was an ally, a guide through the intricate and often intimidating world of the legal system. She brought with her not only expertise, but also the compassion and tenacity that families need in moments like these. Over the following weeks, Mark met with Susan regularly. They pored over police reports, witness statements, and video footage. Susan explained the legal landscape, what charges could be filed, the importance of gathering evidence, and the strategies to ensure Emily's voice was heard. Mark learned that seeking justice was a process of patience and persistence. It required meticulous preparation and the courage to face opposition from powerful institutions. Susan's expertise demystified the system, turning it from an overwhelming maze into a battlefield they could strategically navigate. More importantly, Susan emphasized the necessity of emotional support alongside legal action. "Mark," she told him during one meeting, "this isn't just about the law. It's about healing your family, protecting Emily, and making sure this never happens to anyone else." Their conversations often touched on broader themes, systemic issues within law enforcement. the impact of racial bias, and the urgent need for reform. Susan encouraged Mark to become not only a plaintiff, but an advocate to use his story as a catalyst for change. Mark absorbed everything, determined to channel his frustration into purposeful action. He realized that winning this case could have far-reaching effects, shining a light on practices that too often went unchallenged. Susan's role became pivotal as she coordinated with investigators, civil rights groups, and media contacts to build a comprehensive case. She was relentless, pushing for transparency and accountability at every turn. Her presence was a constant reassurance to the Thompsons, a reminder that they had a fierce protector in their corner. The legal journey was daunting, filled with setbacks and bureaucratic hurdles. But Mark never lost faith. With Susan's guidance, he found the strength to persevere, fueled by the knowledge that their fight was not just personal, but part of a larger movement for justice. This chapter in Mark's life underscored a vital truth in the face of systemic abuse. Professional legal support is not a luxury. It is a necessity. It can transform helplessness into empowerment and despair into hope. As Mark and Susan prepared to take their case forward, the Thompsons were no longer isolated victims, but warriors armed with knowledge, strategy, and unwavering resolve. Their journey had evolved from survival to advocacy, from pain to purpose. And through it all, Mark held on to one conviction above all, that justice was worth every fight, every sacrifice, and every step taken together with those who believe in truth and fairness. The more Mark and Susan dug into the details of Emily's case, the clearer it became that what they were facing was not an isolated incident, but part of a much larger systemic problem. Police abuse of power. Susan, with years of experience in civil rights litigation, walked Mark through the many ways law enforcement authority can be misused and the devastating consequences that follow. Mark Susan said one afternoon, as they reviewed footage from that day, "This kind of excessive force is sadly too common. It's a failure on multiple levels, not just by the individual officers, but by the system that allows it to happen." She explained that lam quien, or abuse of power, can take many forms. Unjustified use of force, racial profiling, unlawful searches, and a lack of accountability. When officers forget their role is to protect and serve, and instead become aggressors, the very foundation of trust between police and community crumbles. Mark listened intently, absorbing the gravity of these failures. Susan drew parallels to other notorious cases where officers' overreach sparked outrage nationwide. She cited stories like the beating of Rodney King, the shooting of Michael Brown, and countless others. Each a painful example of power unchecked and justice denied. "These aren't just stories on the news," Susan said quietly. "They represent real lives, real families shattered. The ripple effects reach far beyond the immediate victims." She pointed out common mistakes that often lead to abuse. Poor training that emphasizes aggression over de-escalation, a culture of silence among officers, and policies that protect officers from consequences through internal investigations rather than independent oversight. Mark couldn't help but think about Emily's fear, the confusion and pain she endured, because those in uniform forgot their duty. It was not just a failure of individual judgment, but a failure of the entire system. Susan continued, "Without proper oversight, these abuses go unchecked. Police departments must be held accountable, not just internally, but through transparent, independent bodies that the public trusts." Mark nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility growing heavier. It wasn't enough to seek justice for Emily alone. If nothing changed, another family would suffer tomorrow, and another innocent person would face violence from those sworn to protect them. They discussed community policing models that had shown success programs emphasizing empathy communication and partnership between police and residents. When officers build relationships based on respect rather than fear. Susan said the likelihood of conflict decreases dramatically. Mark saw how vital it was to push for reforms, not just in their case, but system-wide. The fight for accountability wasn't just legal, it was cultural. Changing attitudes within departments, improving training, and creating mechanisms for citizen oversight were essential steps. As Mark prepared to share their story publicly, Susan reminded him, "Your case is part of a larger movement. It shines a light on the urgent need for change, but it also offers hope that through collective action, through demand for transparency and justice, we can reshape policing for the better." The lesson was clear. Unchecked power breeds harm. The consequences of Lam Quyen aren't just statistics. They are human lives scarred and communities fractured. For Mark and Emily, this realization fueled a new determination. Their battle was now part of a broader fight for accountability, respect, and justice, not only for their family, but for every person who deserved safety and dignity. In the days ahead, Mark would stand not just as a father seeking justice for his daughter, but as a voice calling for systemic change, urging his community and country to confront the painful truths and to rebuild trust where it has been broken. Because justice requires more than punishment, it demands responsibility, transparency, and a commitment to protect all citizens equally. And that was the fight Mark was ready to lead. The power of a single moment captured on camera can ripple far beyond the scene it records. For Emily, the instinct to reach for her phone during the chaos was not just a response to fear. It was a courageous act of preservation, a choice to hold the truth in her hands when so many forces sought to silence it. As the officers restrained her father and herself, Emily's fingers trembled, but did not falter. She began filming, focusing the lens on the officers' aggressive behavior, the forceful shoves, the harsh words exchanged. The footage was raw and unfiltered, a stark contrast to the polished narratives often released by authorities. Within hours, the video found its way onto social media. Platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram became virtual battlegrounds where the story of Emily and Mark Thompson resonated with millions. Shares, comments, and messages poured in from around the country and even the world. People were shocked, outraged, and compelled to speak up. For Mark, watching the video gain traction was a surreal experience. The very act of making their story visible was a powerful form of resistance. It transformed their personal pain into a public call for justice. Susan Parker, the family's attorney, emphasized the significance of this digital evidence. Emily's video is a game changer, she told Mark during one meeting. It holds those responsible accountable in a way that words alone cannot. It forces transparency and demands answers. The video not only exposed the officers' misconduct, but also challenged the official reports that had minimized or distorted the events. It sparked investigations, compelled officials to respond publicly, and pressured law enforcement to act with greater scrutiny. Mark saw how technology had shifted the balance of power. Social media had given a voice to the voiceless turned bystanders into witnesses, and communities into activists. The old barriers that once shielded abuse behind closed doors were breaking down under the weight of shared truth. Yet with this power came new challenges. The family faced a wave of backlash from those loyal to the police or unwilling to confront uncomfortable realities. Trolls and skeptics questioned the video's authenticity or dismissed Emily's experience. But the Thompson family stood firm, supported by growing allies who recognized the importance of standing up against injustice. Community leaders, activists, and ordinary citizens rallied around the Thompsons. Petitions were signed, protests organized, and fundraisers held to support legal efforts. The viral video became more than just footage. It became a symbol of resistance, of hope, and of the urgent need for change. Mark reflected on the profound shift that technology had enabled. When I served overseas, we relied on radio's coded messages and intelligence briefings, he said. Now, the truth can be captured instantly and shared worldwide. It's a powerful tool for accountability. This new landscape demanded responsibility. The Thompsons used their platform to educate others about the realities of police misconduct and the importance of documenting such encounters. They urged people to remain vigilant, to speak out, and to support reforms. Susan reminded Mark, the fight for justice now includes fighting for the truth, to be seen and heard. Emily's courage in recording that moment has inspired many. It's a reminder that one person's voice can echo across the world. As their story continued to unfold in the public eye, Mark, Emily, and Linda became more than victims. They became leaders in a movement demanding fairness, transparency, and respect. Their experience showed how technology and social media, wielded with courage and purpose, could transform pain into power. The video was not just a recording. It was a catalyst, igniting conversations and actions that reached far beyond Oakridge. It demonstrated that in today's world, the camera is not just a tool, but a shield, a means to protect, reveal, and ultimately change the course of justice. For the Thompsons, this was a new battlefield. But with the truth on their side and the world watching, they had never been stronger. The day of the press conference arrived with an air thickened by tension and uncertainty. The Oakridge Police Department had called the media to address the growing public outcry over the incident involving Emily Thompson. Reporters from local stations, bloggers, and community activists gathered outside the department headquarters, their cameras and microphones ready to capture every word. Inside the sterile conference room, Chief Daniels stood behind the podium, flanked by several high-ranking officers. His expression was measured, the practiced calm of a man used to facing scrutiny. Yet beneath the surface, an undeniable effort to control the narrative was palpable. "We understand the community's concerns." Chief Daniels began, his voice steady. "Our officers responded to a call about a disturbance and acted within the protocols established to ensure public safety." His words were carefully chosen, conveying authority, but carefully avoiding direct admission of wrongdoing. As the reporters' hands shot up with questions, the atmosphere grew charged. "Chief Daniels, can you explain why excessive force was used on Emily Thompson?" asked a young journalist, her voice firm. "We are conducting an internal investigation," Daniels replied. "Until that process is complete, we cannot comment on specifics." The statement was met with murmurs of frustration. Another reporter pressed. The video circulating online shows officers pushing and striking Emily. "How do you reconcile that with your statement that protocols were followed?" Chief Daniels' eyes narrowed slightly. "We acknowledge the video raises important questions, but video alone does not always capture the full context. We ask the public to reserve judgment until all facts are reviewed." Outside the conference room, the crowd watching live broadcasts reacted with mixed emotions, skepticism, anger, and disappointment. Many felt the department's responses were evasive, designed to protect officers rather than seek justice. Mark Thompson watched the press conference from home, flanked by Linda and Emily. He clenched his fists as he heard the guarded statements. The carefully crafted words were a stark contrast to the harsh reality his family had endured. For Mark, the lack of transparency was a betrayal not only to his family, but to the entire community. "This isn't about protecting the badge at all costs," Mark muttered. "It's about protecting the people the badge is supposed to serve." Community leaders echoed his sentiments. At a gathering later that week, Pastor Williams addressed a crowd. "Trust is earned through honesty, not denial. If we want a safer, fairer Oakridge, we need our institutions to be accountable." The media continued to question the police, uncovering inconsistencies and pushing for independent oversight. The public's demand for clarity intensified, fueled by the raw video evidence and personal testimonies like Emily's. This moment revealed a profound truth. Transparency is the cornerstone of trust. Without it, communities fracture and suspicion festers. Law enforcement agencies, no matter how noble their intentions, risk losing legitimacy if they withhold information or attempt to deflect responsibility. For the Thompsons, the press conference was a stark reminder of the challenges ahead. It underscored the importance of perseverance and the critical role that public scrutiny plays in the pursuit of justice. Yet it also galvanized support. Citizens realized that their voices mattered, that holding power to account was a collective responsibility. The lesson was clear: openness and honesty, even when uncomfortable, are essential to healing and progress. Without them, wounds deepen and divides widen. Mark knew that the road to justice was long and arduous. But in moments like these, when the community's resolve was tested, the foundation of true change was laid, and he was determined to walk that path step by step until justice was not just a promise, but a reality for his family and Oakridge. Officer Wade Lawson was a young man with years ahead in the police force, a career path he had chosen with pride and a desire to serve his community. When the incident involving Emily Thompson erupted, Wade found himself caught between loyalty to his colleagues and the undeniable discomfort growing within his conscience. At first, Wade had stood with his fellow officers, convinced that their actions were justified under the weight of stressful circumstances. But as the video of Emily's treatment spread and the community's outrage grew, a slow but persistent voice inside him began to question what he had witnessed. One evening, after a long shift, Wade sat alone in his small apartment, replaying the footage again and again. Each viewing chipped away at the certainty he'd once held: the officer's harshness, the disregard for a young woman's dignity. How could this be right? How could he reconcile his role as a protector with what he saw? His thoughts were interrupted by a text from his mentor, Sergeant Reynolds, a seasoned officer known for his integrity. "Wade, you need to think about what justice really means," it read. That night marked the beginning of a profound internal struggle. Wade wrestled with fear of backlash, the pressure to stay silent, and the growing realization that standing by was a betrayal of his own values. Days later, during a departmental meeting, Wade found the courage to speak up. "We can't ignore what happened," he said, quietly but firmly. "If we want the community to trust us, we have to be honest and hold ourselves accountable." His words were met with resistance. Some dismissed him as naive, others warned of loyalty and brotherhood. But Wade stood firm, driven by a conviction that had grown from facing the uncomfortable truth. He reached out to community leaders, attended public forums, and began working with internal affairs to support a thorough and transparent investigation. His actions earned both respect and criticism, but Wade understood that change often comes at a cost. Wade's journey from silent complicity to active allyship exemplified a powerful lesson people can change when confronted with truth and conscience. It challenged the stereotype of unwavering loyalty and showed that integrity could prevail over fear. For the community and the Thompsons, Wade's decision was a beacon of hope. It signaled that not all within the system were blind to injustice and that allies could emerge from unexpected places. Mark Thompson, upon learning of Wade's stance, saw it as a vital step toward healing and reform. "This is what true courage looks like," he said. "It's not just about fighting outside forces, but confronting the flaws within." Wade's transformation underscored the importance of empathy, accountability, and the belief that individuals hold the power to reshape institutions from within. In a system often criticized for silence and protectionism, Wade's choice was a reminder that change is possible, one person, one decision at a time. His story became part of the larger narrative, inspiring others in law enforcement to reflect, question, and strive for justice beyond the badge. And as Oakridge watched a community once divided, found renewed faith that truth and integrity could pave the way toward a better future. Mark Thompson was no stranger to confinement. Years spent in hostile environments had taught him that true strength came from within. But as he sat in the sterile, dimly lit holding cell, awaiting processing the reality of being detained by the very system he once respected, was a new kind of battle altogether. The cold metal bench beneath him was unforgiving, but Mark's resolve remained unshaken. Around him, the muffled sounds of the station. The clanging of doors, distant voices, the sharp commands of officers formed a chaotic backdrop. Yet inside his mind, a calm clarity prevailed. He reflected on the weight of the moment. Here he was, a decorated Navy SEAL, trained to endure the harshest conditions, now confined in a small, cold room. But more than physical discomfort, the challenge was psychological, maintaining composure when every instinct screamed for outrage. Mark understood that losing control here would serve no one. He had to be the pillar for Emily, Linda, and even himself. The image he projected mattered not just as a former soldier and as a father, standing firm against injustice. Memories of past missions surfaced, long nights in hostile territory, the quiet discipline needed to survive. He drew strength from these recollections, reminding himself that adversity was not new. What was different now was that this fight was personal, and the stakes were immeasurably high. His hands rested calmly on his knees as he practiced controlled breathing, a technique drilled into him over decades. Inhale deeply, hold, exhale slowly. The rhythm steadied his nerves, sharpening his focus. Despite the uncertainty outside the cell, inside Mark's mind, a strategy formed. He would face this ordeal with dignity, using restraint as a form of resistance. He knew that the battle outside would be fought with words, evidence, and relentless advocacy. His role now was to endure, to prepare for what lay ahead. At times, officers passed by the cell, their eyes lingering briefly. Some looked away quickly, uncomfortable or dismissive. Mark returned their gazes steadily, refusing to show weakness. In the silence, he allowed himself a moment to think of Emily, her courage, her pain. She was counting on him, just as he counted on the values instilled in him throughout his service: honor, perseverance, and integrity. Hours passed, each one testing his patience. But Mark remained resolute. He understood that this moment of confinement was but a chapter in a larger story, a story of a family's fight for justice and a community's demand for accountability. When finally he was led out of the cell, his posture was unbroken. His voice, when he spoke to officers or lawyers, was steady and commanding. Mark's inner strength had preserved not only his dignity, but also the hope that justice would prevail. This experience underscored a profound lesson through. Power lies not in physical might or authority, but in the resilience of the human spirit. The ability to endure hardship with grace and purpose is the greatest weapon in any struggle. For Mark Thompson, the holding cell was not a place of defeat, but a crucible where his resolve was reforged. And as he stepped back into the fight, he carried with him the unyielding strength that had defined his life, ready to face whatever came next with unwavering courage. The journey into the legal labyrinth began the moment Mark Thompson stepped out of that holding cell. With Susan Parker by his side, the family was ready to confront the complex, often intimidating machinery of justice. But the path was anything but straightforward. Their first step was gathering evidence, a task that demanded patience, precision, and an unwavering commitment. Susan explained the importance of building a solid case, one that could withstand the scrutiny of a courtroom and the defenses of seasoned legal teams. "We need everything," she said, her tone serious but hopeful. "Video footage, witness statements, medical reports, every piece will help paint the full picture." Mark, Linda, and Emily spent countless hours recounting the incident, revisiting every detail, no matter how painful. Neighbors who had witnessed the scene came forward, offering their accounts, lending their voices to the truth. But assembling the evidence was just the beginning. The Thompsons soon faced the harsh reality of a legal system designed to protect institutions as much as individuals. Documents were delayed, requests for information met with resistance, and procedural hurdles threatened to stall their progress. Susan fought tirelessly, pushing for transparency and accountability. She navigated the maze of legal jargon and bureaucratic delays with skill, but the strain was visible. Late nights and mounting pressure tested everyone's resolve. Meanwhile, media attention added another layer of complexity. Public scrutiny brought support, but also misinformation and skepticism. Mark learned to balance the desire to share their story with the need for discretion, knowing that every word could impact the case. Throughout it all, Mark's military discipline proved invaluable. He approached the legal battle as a mission, strategic, methodical, and relentless. Each setback was met with renewed determination. Each small victory a step closer to justice. Yet the emotional toll was undeniable. The constant reminders of the trauma, the uncertainty of the outcome, and the weight of fighting a powerful system weighed heavily on the family. Susan provided more than legal guidance. She became a pillar of support, offering reassurance and clarity when doubt crept in. "This is a marathon, not a sprint," she reminded them. "Stay focused. Stay united." The Thompsons also found strength in community. Advocates, activists, and ordinary citizens rallied around them, their voices amplifying the call for justice and reform. As the court date approached, the family prepared themselves not just for a legal battle, but for a fight to reclaim their dignity and demand accountability. This phase of their journey highlighted a painful truth. Seeking justice is rarely simple or swift. It requires courage, endurance, and the support of those who believe in fairness. Mark often reflected on the parallels between this fight and his military service, the strategy, the discipline, the resilience. But this was a new battlefield one, where the enemy was not an external force, but systemic inertia and resistance to change. Despite the challenges, the Thompsons remained resolute. Their story was no longer just about one family. It was a beacon for others who had suffered in silence. Through every hurdle, Every legal document and every tense meeting they held on to hope. Hope that justice would prevail, that truth would be heard, and that their fight would pave the way for a more just and accountable future. The legal journey ahead was daunting, but Mark knew one thing for certain. They would face it together, armed with truth, courage, and an unbreakable bond. The tension that gripped Oakridge after the incident involving Emily Thompson quickly evolved into a powerful wave of collective action. What began as quiet whispers among neighbors and concerned citizens soon blossomed into organized, peaceful demonstrations that filled the town's streets with chants for justice and calls for reform. Mark and his family watched as the community they had called home rallied around them, turning outrage into hope. The first protest was held in the town square, where hundreds gathered, people of all ages, backgrounds, and beliefs, united by a shared demand for accountability. Banners waved in the crisp air, emblazoned with messages like "Justice for Emily End," "Police brutality," and "Protect our communities." The energy was electric but peaceful, a testament to the determination and discipline of those who refused to let this injustice be forgotten. Local leaders, activists, and residents took turns speaking into microphones, sharing stories of their own encounters with systemic abuse and expressing solidarity with the Thompsons. Mark listened from the sidelines, his heart swelling with gratitude and pride. The sight of so many people standing shoulder to shoulder, voices raised in unison, was a balm to wounds both seen and unseen. In the weeks that followed, these demonstrations became regular occurrences. Community centers hosted forums where people could discuss reforms, share resources, and strategize. Social media campaigns spread the message far beyond Oakridge, drawing national attention and support. Fundraising efforts sprang up to help cover legal fees and support the Thompsons during this arduous journey. Local businesses donated goods and services, while volunteers organized food drives and support groups. The outpouring of generosity was overwhelming and deeply affirming. Emily, initially hesitant to step into the spotlight, found strength in the community's embrace. She attended rallies alongside her parents, her presence a living testament to resilience and courage. Each march and gathering was a step toward healing and empowerment, not just for her, but for countless others inspired by her story. Susan Parker. The family's lawyer spoke at several events, emphasizing the importance of sustained civic engagement and vigilance. "Justice is not won in courtrooms alone," she told the crowds. "It is built through the collective will of a community that refuses to accept injustice as the norm." The media coverage amplified these efforts, highlighting the solidarity and peaceful nature of the protests. Journalists interviewed participants who spoke candidly about the need for systemic change, police accountability, and better community relations. Amid this momentum, the Thompsons became symbols of a larger movement. Their fight for justice resonated with people who had long felt marginalized and unheard. They represented the possibility of change, a beacon that inspired others to raise their voices and take action. Yet the journey was not without challenges. There were moments of tension, debates about the best paths forward, and the ever-present risk of backlash. But the community's commitment never wavered. Mark often reflected on the power of unity. "In battle, strength comes from the team," he said during a community gathering. "This fight is no different. Together we are stronger than any force that seeks to silence us," Linda added. "The kindness, the support. It's what's keeping us going. It reminds us that we're not alone, and that together, change is possible." This chapter in the Thompsons' journey underscored a vital truth. Lasting change is rooted in community. When people come together with shared purpose and determination, they can challenge even the most entrenched systems. The protests, campaigns, and acts of solidarity became a testament to the human spirit's capacity for empathy, resilience, and action. They showed that beyond laws and policies, it is the collective heart of a community that drives progress. As Oakridge marched forward, the Thompsons stood at the center, not as victims, but as leaders, their courage amplified by the voices of those who walked beside them. The movement was a powerful reminder that justice is not just a destination, but a journey taken together. And in that journey, every voice mattered. As the story of the Thompsons and their fight for justice in Oakridge gained momentum locally, it inevitably caught the attention of national media outlets. What began as a community's call for accountability rapidly escalated into a spotlight shining on systemic issues across the country. News anchors, talk shows, and social media influencers all began discussing the incident, using it as a lens to explore the broader challenges of policing racial bias and civil rights. Major networks dispatched reporters to Oakridge, eager to capture first-hand accounts. Interviews with Mark, Emily, and Linda became central features in documentaries and news segments. Susan Parker's legal efforts were highlighted as a beacon of hope in a landscape often marred by silence and injustice. The Thompsons' personal story became a powerful symbol within a nationwide movement demanding police reform and social justice. Activists linked their experience to similar cases across the United States, weaving a narrative of resilience and resistance that transcended geography. Social media exploded with hashtags supporting the Thompsons, sparking conversations in virtual spaces from urban centers to rural towns. Hashtags like #JusticeForEmily and #Oakridge Rises trended, bringing visibility to both the individual case and the systemic issues it represented. Editorials and opinion pieces connected the dots between isolated incidents and patterns of abuse, amplifying calls for legislative change, increased transparency, and better community relations. Public figures from various backgrounds lent their voices, adding weight and urgency to the cause. At rallies across the nation, signs bearing Emily's name stood alongside those advocating for broader reforms, illustrating how one family's fight had inspired a collective call for justice. The movement gained strength, fueled by stories like the Thompsons that personalized abstract concepts and gave them human faces. This surge of national attention brought both opportunities and challenges. While it increased pressure on officials and lent resources to the legal battle, it also brought scrutiny and polarized opinions. The Thompsons navigated this complex landscape with grace, understanding that their story was part of a larger conversation that could shape the future. Mark often reflected on the profound connection between their personal struggle and the wider social movement. "Our fight isn't just about us," he said in an interview. "It's about every person who's been silenced, marginalized, or mistreated." Our story is their story. This link between the individual and the collective underscored a fundamental truth. Social change begins with stories. Stories that reveal injustice, inspire empathy, and ignite action. The Thompsons' experience illuminated the human cost of systemic failings and the power of resilience. Media coverage and public discourse helped mobilize lawmakers, prompting discussions about reforms in police training, accountability mechanisms, and community engagement strategies. The national spotlight created a platform for voices that had long been overlooked, giving urgency to demands for meaningful change. For the Thompsons, this broad attention was both a validation and a responsibility. They recognized the power of their platform and sought to use it to advocate not just for themselves, but for countless others. They spoke at conferences, participated in panel discussions, and collaborated with advocacy groups to keep the momentum alive. The connection between their personal narrative and the larger movement highlighted the intersection of individual courage and collective power. It was a reminder that behind every headline, there are real lives affected and real hope for transformation. As the nation listened, Oakridge's story became a catalyst for reflection and reform, proving that even the smallest communities can influence the course of history when they stand united for justice. In this way, the Thompsons' journey transcended their town, becoming part of a movement that challenged America to confront its past, reckon with its present, and strive for a more equitable future. The heart of the crisis that gripped Oakridge and countless communities across the nation lay not just in individual actions, but in systemic failures deeply embedded in police training and the broader legal framework. As Mark Thompson's case gained traction, experts and activists began dissecting these root causes, striving to understand how the very system meant to protect had, in too many cases, enabled abuse. Police training, it became clear, was a crucial starting point. Traditional methods often emphasized aggression control and rapid use of force, sometimes at the expense of communication and de-escalation. Officers were trained to respond swiftly and decisively, but rarely were they equipped with the tools to handle nuanced social situations involving trauma, mental health issues, or cultural sensitivities. In Oakridge and many departments nationwide, this imbalance created an environment ripe for misunderstanding and excessive force. The officers involved in Emily Thompson's case, like many others, operated under protocols that prioritized command and control over empathy and dialogue. Experts highlighted that while physical readiness and tactical skills were essential, the absence of comprehensive psychological and community engagement training left officers ill-prepared to navigate the complexities of their role as protectors of diverse populations. Moreover, the culture within many police departments often discouraged questioning authority or challenging aggressive tactics, fostering an us versus them mentality. This culture could stifle accountability, as officers might fear repercussions for speaking out against misconduct or advocating for change. Compounding these issues was a legal system that too often shielded law enforcement from consequences. Qualified immunity laws, internal investigations lacking transparency, and prosecutorial reluctance to pursue charges against officers created significant barriers to justice. Victims and their families faced uphill battles in proving wrongdoing, even when evidence was compelling. These systemic flaws meant that incidents like the one involving Emily were not anomalies, but symptoms of broader institutional problems. Recognizing this, advocates called for sweeping reforms, targeting both training programs and legal protections. Comprehensive retraining was a central demand. This included mandatory education on implicit bias, cultural competency crisis intervention, and nonviolent communication. Departments were urged to adopt community policing models that fostered trust through partnership rather than confrontation. On the legal front, reformers pushed for greater transparency in investigations, independent oversight committees, and revisions to qualified immunity laws to ensure officers could be held accountable when misconduct occurred. Mark, through his collaboration with Susan Parker and community leaders, became an outspoken advocate for these reforms. "We need to change how we prepare officers," he said during a public forum. "It's not just about tactics. It's about humanity. Respecting every person regardless of their background has to be at the core of law enforcement. Linda echoed this sentiment, emphasizing the role of education and empathy in preventing future tragedies. Training isn't just a checklist, she said. It's about transforming mindsets and building bridges. Susan highlighted that legal reforms were equally vital. Without accountability, training alone won't suffice. We need laws that protect citizens and ensure justice is accessible and impartial. This analysis shed light on a fundamental truth. Meaningful change requires addressing the system's foundation, not just its surface. It calls for a holistic approach, blending education, cultural shifts, legal overhaul, and community engagement. The Thompsons' journey illuminated these challenges and potential solutions. Their story became a powerful case study in why reform was urgent and necessary, inspiring policy discussions and legislative initiatives. Yet these reforms faced resistance from entrenched interests and bureaucratic inertia. Change demanded persistent advocacy, public pressure, and political will. Through town halls, media appearances, and grassroots organizing, Mark and his allies kept the conversation alive, reminding everyone that justice was not a fleeting moment, but a continuous pursuit. The lessons from Oakridge resonated beyond its borders. They spoke to every community grappling with questions of justice, fairness, and the role of policing in a democratic society. In the end, the Thompsons' fight underscored a profound hope that through informed reform, committed leadership, and collective will, systems can evolve. That training can be transformed from tools of control into instruments of compassion. That laws can shift from shields of impunity into pillars of accountability. And that perhaps most importantly, justice is not a destination, but a journey, one that demands vigilance, courage, and a relentless commitment to doing better. Mark's voice carried this message far and wide. We owe it to our communities, our families, and ourselves to build a system that protects and respects everyone. That's the change we fight for every day. The night that Emily Thompson finally allowed herself to open up about what she had endured was one Mark and Linda would never forget. It was a quiet evening at home, the kind where the world outside faded, and all that remained was the fragile cocoon of family. Emily sat curled up on the couch, her eyes tracing the patterns on the ceiling, her mind wrestling with memories that refused to rest. For weeks, she had carried the invisible scars of that fateful day. The fear, the humiliation, the sense of betrayal that lingered like a shadow over every thought. But beneath the weight of trauma, a spark of resilience flickered, a quiet, determined will to reclaim her life. Mark sat beside her, his presence steady and unwavering. "Whenever you're ready, Emily," he said softly. "We're here to listen. No judgment, just love." Taking a shaky breath, Emily began to speak. The words came haltingly at first, fragments of the ordeal, pieced together with raw emotion. She described the moment she was grabbed, the pain of being pushed down, the confusion that clouded her mind as officers acted without compassion. Tears spilled freely, not just for the physical pain, but for the deeper wound, the loss of trust in those sworn to protect. Linda reached out, holding Emily's hand, grounding her in the safety of family. "You're not alone," she whispered. "We'll get through this together." That night marked the start of a long, winding journey toward healing. Emily began attending therapy sessions, where she confronted her fears and anxieties with the help of a skilled counselor. The process was neither quick nor easy. It demanded courage to face nightmares and to dismantle the walls built to shield herself from pain. Therapy introduced Emily to tools that helped her regain control. Mindfulness exercises to calm panic attacks, techniques to recognize and challenge negative thoughts, and safe spaces to express her feelings without fear. She learned that healing was not linear. There were setbacks and breakthroughs, moments of despair and sparks of hope. Support from her family and community became a lifeline. Friends checked in regularly, neighbors offered kindness, and activists rallied behind her story. The outpouring of solidarity helped restore her faith in humanity and the power of connection. Mark and Linda were pillars of strength, their own struggles woven into a shared mission to support Emily. Mark often reminded her, "Your strength is not just surviving, but rising. Every step forward is a victory." As weeks turned to months, Emily began to reclaim parts of her life once overshadowed by trauma. She returned to her job with cautious optimism, reconnected with old friends, and even found joy in small moments. Sunlight filtering through trees, laughter shared over dinner, the quiet comfort of a good book. Her story became a beacon for others who faced similar battles in silence. Emily spoke openly at community events and support groups, offering hope and encouragement. Her vulnerability became a source of empowerment, showing that recovery while challenging was possible. The journey also highlighted the critical importance of mental health support for victims of violence. Emily's experience underscored the need for accessible counseling, trauma-informed care, and community resources that validate and aid survivors. For Mark, witnessing his daughter's resilience was both humbling and inspiring. "She's a warrior," he said proudly, "not because of what happened to her, but because of how she's chosen to rise above it." Emily's story taught a profound lesson. Healing is a collective effort built on love, understanding, and the courage to confront pain. It reminded the community that trauma, while deeply personal, is also a shared challenge, one that calls for compassion, patience, and unwavering support. Through Emily's eyes, the Thompsons' fight for justice gained a deeper dimension, one that encompassed not only accountability, but also restoration of spirit. Their story became a testament to the human capacity to endure, to rebuild, and ultimately, to thrive. And as Emily continued her journey, she carried with her the knowledge that she was not defined by her trauma, but by the strength and grace with which she faced it, lighting the way for others to find their own path to healing. The courtroom was packed with a mix of anticipation, tension, and cautious hope. After months of preparation, testimonies, and legal maneuvering, the day of judgment had finally arrived. Mark Thompson, flanked by Susan Parker and his family, sat silently as the proceedings unfolded. Every word, every gesture carried the weight of not only their personal struggle, but also the hopes of a community yearning for justice. The prosecution laid out a compelling case. They presented Emily's video footage, witness testimonies, and expert analysis that exposed the excessive force and violation of civil rights by the officers involved. The defense, meanwhile, attempted to downplay the evidence, arguing procedural justification and the stress of the situation. But the facts, supported by unassailable evidence, were undeniable. As the judge delivered the verdict, the room held its breath. The ruling was a landmark victory. The officers were found guilty of misconduct, and the court mandated significant reforms within the Oakridge Police Department. This included mandatory retraining, focused on de-escalation, cultural sensitivity, and community engagement, alongside the establishment of an independent oversight board to ensure transparency and accountability. For the Thompsons, the verdict was more than a legal win. It was validation. It acknowledged their pain, their courage, and their relentless fight for justice, Mark felt a profound sense of relief, but also a renewed responsibility to keep pushing for change. The impact of the case rippled through Oakridge and beyond. The local police department, once resistant to scrutiny, began implementing reforms. Officers underwent new training sessions, and community forums became regular events where residents could voice concerns and collaborate on safety strategies. The case inspired other communities facing similar issues to come forward, sparking a broader movement demanding police accountability nationwide. Media outlets hailed the verdict as a significant step towards systemic change, highlighting the power of determined individuals to challenge entrenched systems. Social justice organizations used the case as a rallying point, advocating for legislative reforms and increased funding for mental health services, body cameras, and civilian review boards. Mark, Emily, and Linda became voices for change, sharing their story to inspire others and advocate for continued vigilance against injustice. Their journey demonstrated that while the path to justice is long and fraught with obstacles, victory is possible. This legal triumph underscored a powerful lesson. Accountability is essential to rebuilding trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve. It showed that justice, though delayed, can prevail when individuals refuse to be silenced. More broadly, the case illuminated how one family's resilience could catalyze social transformation. It reaffirmed the principle that every voice matters and that standing up against injustice can lead to meaningful progress. For Oakridge, the verdict marked a turning point, a commitment to healing reform, and a future where dignity and respect are fundamental rights, not privileges. Mark reflected on the journey with a sense of solemn pride. This victory is for Emily, for every family affected, and for the future of our community, he said. It shows that change is possible when we stand together, speak truth, and demand justice. The Thompson story became a testament to the enduring power of courage, truth, and collective action in the ongoing fight against injustice, a beacon lighting the way forward for others to follow. Standing on the makeshift stage in the town square, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, Mark Thompson took a deep breath. The crowd before him was a tapestry of faces. Neighbors, activists, journalists, and strangers brought together by a shared belief in justice. Among them stood Emily. Her eyes steady, reflecting a quiet strength forged through unimaginable trials. Mark's voice carried with clarity and conviction as he began to speak, weaving their journey from pain to perseverance. Our story is not just about one family or one incident. It is about the fight for dignity, fairness, and truth that resonates in every community. He paused, scanning the faces before him. For too long, voices like ours were silenced, dismissed, or ignored. But silence is not the answer. Justice does not come to those who wait quietly. It comes to those who stand up, speak out, and demand change. Emily stepped forward, her presence a testament to resilience. I was scared, I was hurt, and I felt powerless. But with the love of my family and the support of our community, I found my voice. And I want every person listening to know your voice matters. She looked out at the crowd, her gaze fierce yet compassionate. When we share our stories, we shine a light on injustice. When we stand together, we become unstoppable. Their words ignited a chorus of applause and cheers, a collective affirmation of hope and determination. It was a moment not just of victory, but of awakening, a call to action, echoing far beyond Oakridge. Mark continued, "Change requires courage, It demands that we hold those in power accountable. It means demanding transparency, reform, and respect. But most importantly, it means believing in the power of each individual. He spoke of the lessons learned, the importance of community, the necessity of legal advocacy, and the healing power of solidarity. Every step we've taken was built on the strength of countless others who refused to accept injustice. Emily's voice softened, but did not lose its strength. You don't have to be a hero to make a difference. You just have to be willing to stand up and speak out. Their message was clear and unwavering. Justice is a collective journey fueled by the voices and actions of individuals. Each person, regardless of background or circumstance, has the power to illuminate the path toward fairness and equality. As the crowd dispersed, many carried with them a renewed sense of purpose. The Thompsons' story had transcended their own experience, becoming a beacon for others to find courage in their own battles. The final lesson was simple yet profound: justice will never come if we remain silent. Every voice raised, every story shared, every act of courage contributes to the light that can banish injustice. Mark and Emily's words echoed into the evening, a rallying cry for change and a reminder that within each of us lies the power to be a guiding light in the darkest of times. And with that, their journey was far from over. It was a legacy in motion, inspiring others to speak, to fight, and to believe that together, justice is not just a dream, but a future within reach. Before we part ways, remember your voice matters more than you think. If Emily's story moved you, if justice and truth mean something to you, don't just listen, take action. Hit that subscribe button now so you never miss a story that demands to be heard. Because silence isn't innocent. And here's the truth that nobody wants to admit: injustice thrives in the shadows we choose to ignore. So will you be the light that breaks through, or let darkness win again? The choice is yours.